So welcome everyone and good morning. Let's get started. So I invite everyone to check your phones to make sure that they don't disturb our call. We're going to be here together for about 1 hour. And now we'd like to invite people to share in the chat. Where are you calling in from today? Okay, Denmark, UK, Wales, Congo. Rosemary is in New South Wales, Australia.
Blue Mountains.
Lesotho, great. It's nice to see some familiar faces. For example, Montueli from Lesotho, who is his country's first PDC certificate holder, and he did a teacher training with us.
Congratulations, Maratani. And Dilek, we meet again. Turkey. It's very good. It's a happiness.
Amelia from Skauna, which is where my grandfather is from in southern Sweden.
Yeah.
Super. Well, I'm already excited to see the diversity and distribution of people joining the call today. So my name is Alfred Decker, and I'm a permaculture educator that's based in Catalonia in the Spanish territory. And I'm here today in large part because of a moment about 12 years ago. Whether it was random or fate, we don't know, but I happened to tell a friend, I'm thinking that instead of just doing permaculture, I want to actually teach permaculture. And my friend turned to me and said, that's amazing because we're looking for a permaculture teacher to do 2 courses with us in just a few months. So it was a case of be careful for what you ask for. So I immediately went home and looked online, Permaculture Teacher Training Europe 2011, and found that Rosemary Morrow was going to do a teacher training right before the first course that I had just been invited to teach. So that has led to a collaboration that has really changed and enriched my life. So I'm focused on permaculture education more than design, and in particular these days on teacher trainings, because Rosemary talked about in that first course I took how permaculture teacher trainings can have a multiplier effect on the spread of permaculture. And so I started that course feeling nervous about who am I to teach permaculture, and at the end of the course to feeling who am I not to teach permaculture. So so that's a bit of my path here. But now I'd like to hear a bit from Rosemary. Rosemary, who are you and how did you get involved in permaculture?
All right. So this morning when I looked in the mirror, I was Rosemary Morrow, and I still am. And I started permaculture. I did a course in 86. And with a short time, I realized that with the oral tradition of permaculture, it's pretty soon going to become anything to anyone. Whatever you thought you could teach permaculture. I've heard people say, well, everything's permaculture, isn't it? And I realized to be totally effective, we needed to put permaculture within a framework and make it responsive completely to the ethics. So, the ethics, care of people, care of the earth, care of English. Sorry, I'm reading something that's come up on the script screen. I'm cancelling. Right. Care of the earth, care of people, and redistribute surplus to need. And so I decided to have a look at what was common to all the teachers of the world, and most of it was transforming degraded landscapes. And there was a way of teaching that was really effective. Anyone could do it. Although the greatest emphasis has been on growing food, it's just as much today on managing water well, grey water, and saving water and working with water and getting it into the ground and getting it into the water table. So somehow I put that into a framework, but to do that, I read all Bill's books and I spent 10 days with him in Vietnam, and then I read all David's books and I visited him many times. And although the information was assembled differently, it's the same information. If you go back to my first teacher's book, where you can look up where that work was first quoted, you can go back to Bill and David's work. So that started me on a quest, not particularly to standardize permaculture, but to give a curriculum which was effective. And at that stage, like everyone else, I was looking at care of the earth. And then suddenly it occurred to me, I heard some complaints about teachers. I heard people doing permaculture for bumps on your head, and permaculture's everything, and all Indigenous people always did permaculture. And well, you've probably heard it, haven't you? I would imagine. You know, people say it's anything. Permaculture for swimming in the Atlantic. That was unusual. Laughing permaculture, we all laugh at each other, whether we take care of each other or the earth or not. So I decided that we could teach, all of you. You can teach in ways that as care of people. So that's what started these courses, and it's based on something called Alternative to Violence, which treats people, mentioned it again, alternatives to violence, and it treats people as if they come with knowledge and ability. And it gives them lots of things to do. So in a way, you're setting a program for them to learn to become teachers. But the same program, they're teaching themselves in the afternoon how to do it. And we just provide guideposts more than actual do this or do that. Okay, that's enough about me. I live in Australia. I live in the Blue Mountains where it's raining tonight. And you're coming into summer, we're coming into autumn, you're coming spring, we're coming to autumn, a lot of you. And it's lovely to be here with you. So, Alfie, there's nothing else, is there? That's all.
Well,
That's the my life.
that's a lot. It's pretty good, but maybe a word about permaculture for refugees.
Oh, yeah. Well, there were two things that I was able to found. Remember, I didn't come to permaculture till I was 42, so you're still all babies. A whole lot of you are babies, and you certainly came to it younger than I did, I'm sure. So you've got a lot that you can break new ground and achieve. So I did my first course in 42, and that changed everything. I was able to go overseas to Vietnam. And then by the time I got to 75, in those years, we started Blue Mountains Permaculture Institute, which is for people who speak other languages, are illiterate. Might affect people in Lesotho, I think, and perhaps in the Congo. People who don't have formal education. And what I learned in all the years of working in countries of war and civil war was people are equally able to get concepts. It's how you teach them. If you can't understand something, you've been badly taught. It's not that you're stupid. It's really interesting how a good teacher can put things in a way everyone can understand. So the next thing was to teach so that it's comprehensible and care of people. That is, people finish your courses feeling elated and empowered. And you know, early in the piece, I met people who had been told they were an empty head in the course, or that they were stupid, or to be quiet, or no one listened to their knowledge, which was utterly relevant. And so I decided we had to have a course in which the second ethic of permaculture was equally used as a process through all the permaculture teachings to the syllabus taught about the environment. The third ethic probably needs more work in rich countries than poor, because poorer people share more than rich people do. Anyway, because we're all worried about our future and our superannuation and things if we're wealthy, and if you're just sharing your food, well, it's easier to share somehow. However, that's a little bit of my experience. We could talk about it later, but that's enough for me. Hey, welcome to any new people. Thank you. Oh, Uganda. Ah, very good. I don't speak Ugandan. It's a lovely country. Right. Okay.
Right. Okay. So the plan for this hour is a bit of a conversation and then a question and answer session. And then we'll share a bit about an upcoming permaculture teacher training that's both online and some in-person ones. And so I want to start a conversation with Rosemary, asking her, what is the role of permaculture education in addressing the polycrisis that we are living in. Polycrisis being this a new concept of, instead of separate crises that we're facing, it's actually one big crisis with feedback, positive feedback loops between the different ones. So positive, not in the sense of beneficial, happy, but positive in terms of the different crises are impacting and making worse the others. So we can now look at climate, economy, mass migration, rise of the far right as one polycrisis. But Rosemary, what role does permaculture education have in addressing the polycrisis?
It's a big question, isn't it? I hope
Yeah.
you're all thinking what your answer would be,
I
everyone
could
there.
ask you how the weather is, or if the sports team won where you live, but I thought to start with a more
Hard,
challenging one.
hard questions are important because as a teacher, you get asked them. Well, I guess the first thing we do in our teaching is to talk about what are the global problems. And today, those global problems are recognized by the UN as the planetary boundaries. You break one, it will have a confirmatory effect on derogatory. You start breaking many and everything goes faster. So the time between disasters gets shorter and the disasters get bigger. What can permaculture do? I think for that, we're going to look for a few countries, perhaps like tiny little East Timor or the Cameroon to some extent, and Uganda, and countries where permaculture is practiced and accepted by the governments and put into syllabus of schools. So we are powerful, but we also need the teachers who teach. You may not have heard of Nurani Abu Bakir in Malaysia. She's got it accepted into universities and Department of Agriculture. The future of permaculture is going to be people like yourselves who carry it somewhere. So what I was going to say is when I turned 75, we had started Blue Mountains Permaculture Institute for people who wanted a different route from setting exams and assignments. Then we started Permaculture for Refugees. That's when we started hitting the wall in terms of the relevance of permaculture to probably 2/3 of the world. People living in cities, tight conditions, no access to land. So really the thing is, and this is in line with that wonderful, I think it was a Swedish philosopher who said, start at the worst problems. Start at the bottom. Let's get rid of smallpox. Next one I'd like to get rid of would be the military industries and complex and get rid of war. But if we can start where the problems are greatest and get rid of those, then everything's lifted up quite a bit. So what I think we have to do is teach where we are and teach effectively. Our council has 6 or 8 permaculture trained people in it, and they're making decisions about town planning, about future resources, about bushland and parkland, about care of our 128-kilometre long local government area and 27 towns. Now that's considerable. So I think we start where we are and we teach well so that people get it and want to run with it. The information is good enough for people to become motivated and impassioned. It's the delivery we want.
Yeah.
It's
Okay. And where would you recommend that people start? How to engage with permaculture education if you're just getting started? How to make it as relevant as possible for where you live?
look, I don't always do that. I start where I am. I start with the first day and people pick up a piece of paper and we make them draw from reality. Drawing makes your observations accurate. Get them a piece of paper, put north at the top, and start working for the next 3 days on their own land. They love it. Someone will say to you, I never knew where north was before. I never really registered the cold winds came from the south or the west, or the fires came from here. And so it's this journey of discovery as you take them through a questions, graded questions through to understand their own land and then work together on a bigger project. So you're taking that knowledge for the first few days and you're saying, now you work on a bigger project, a school, a township, your street, I don't care. But what you're doing is making it long-term sustainable with permaculture design methods. People are usually thrilled to know there's a lot of undisguised and sometimes hidden insecurities about the future. COVID's made it worse. When the distribution lines cut down, when the boat stopped, when the boat got stuck in sewers. Now, most of our stuff is coming in and out of our countries. If we can meet our own needs, basic permaculture principle, meet your own needs. If you can do that, you're really on the way to becoming a permaculturist. Once you're providing surplus and swapping it, you get 10 out of 10. You've got a full point. So meet your needs, then meet your neighbour's needs, and then spread it. That's the way to go. Make it relevant for where people are, but teach globally. I teach permaculture in deserts, in Uganda, right? In Afghanistan, in Vietnam, hot, wet, and I'm teaching roughly the same syllabus. The only difference is when I get to plant lists, I say, now you write down the top 10 vegetables. You write down the best problems. Oh, send that to you. And you write down how many days it to grow or what the local varieties are. And you do that in your own language, right? And then people can do that, right? You just clue them into their own necessity to do it. What are the best trees for shade, wind, dust, sunlight, temperature control? They know their own stuff. They can do it generally. If they can't, you can direct them somewhere to do it and come back. But you don't teach them everything. But we also want them to know, if they're living in Afghanistan, we want them to know that what they do affects the oceans, that up there in Afghanistan on the Kabul River, it goes down to Pakistan and out to the Gulf. And that is floating with crud. So, the impacts that we have can be global. What we put into the air, we know. Anyway, so there you are. That's sort of a start. And don't ever think, you never know who's going to carry it. That's the exciting thing. Someone will grab something from your teaching and they'll be away. And what I love, like Alfred, they do better than you do. It's that thing about standing on the shoulders of dwarfs, because I'm the dwarf and Alfred gets to be the giant in this case. So you can see that someone grabs it, someone loves it, someone can see how this is important. In fact, Alfred, you did that at the teacher training. You'd done 2 courses. You could see this training was giving you a different and better care of people entree into teaching. Yeah. Do you agree with that, or am I reading that into you? It appears to me.
No, very much so. And to me, it seemed that permaculture was the best way that I could find to engage with the poly crisis, even though it wasn't called a poly crisis 12 years ago. And one thing that I really appreciate about permaculture is that even though it's solutionary, it's about finding practical solutions to the world's problems. As Bill Mollison said, though the problems of the world are becoming increasingly complex, the solutions remain embarrassingly simple. But, really, I really appreciate how permaculture has practical solutions, but it also like Mollison said, we're thinking globally and then acting locally. So for me, this is the best way that I can engage with the poly crisis. But maybe I want to encourage everyone to put any questions that come up for you in the chat, questions and comments, so we can have as much of a conversation as possible. And then also afterwards, we'll have a specific question and answer session. But Rosemary, following up on this, I still remember at that first teacher training that I took with you, you talked about how after teaching dozens of PDCs, that you were inspired to create a teacher training in order to have a multiplier effect. And yeah, I'm wondering what thoughts you might have on how any of us as permaculturalists can help to create multiplier effects. Because, now after 40, 50 years of permaculture, the movement has spread around the world. It is on every continent, in every country. Someone once told me that it's the biggest movement that you've never heard of. Someone has also said if permaculture was an international aid agency or development agency, it would be the biggest in the world with over 1 million PDC graduates and thousands of active projects. But I think it's clear that it hasn't arrived to the scale that's necessary to engage with the poly crisis, to engage with the climate emergency. So what advice or what thoughts do you have on this, Rosemary? What can we do to really spread permaculture more?
I guess because it covers so many areas and it sounds complex. I mean, you do soil on the ground, you do soil in pots, you do soil feeding, and you do a whole lot. You do all the areas of water, you do all the areas of climate and weather and topography. It is huge. I think, now here's a challenge for you all. If we could get the idea out there that a permaculture design is the solution to many of these crises. So if you can meet your own food supply through drought and flood, heat and cold, if you can supply your own water during a drought year and a flood year and manage your floods, if you can manage the temperature in your place through your design, if you're working closely economically with your local community, you're not only solving problems for yourself, you're solving multiple problems. I was being interviewed here the other day by a filmmaker who said, tell me about the water. I said, well, the water also goes with the soil building. And then the shade goes with the soil, and the shade goes with production. And that's the windbreak as well for the droughts and the hot winds. You can see a good design will absolutely solve many of the problems on a regional. It would actually do it on a national scale. We took the whole of Australia and put back all the ocean forests, those littoral forests around the coast, all that material that was there that buffered the sea. If we put back the 82% of woodland and forests that's gone, carbon dioxide would change enormously. There are things that if we did it on a national scale, it could have an almighty effect. Doing it at home is going to have a regional effect, but it's going to buffer many problems. Just saving my water isn't enough, nor is growing my food without looking at water and building soil and mulching and using every bit of waste on site. You can see how they're all interactive to build a strong, I'll even call it resilient system, resilient to all the things that can hit your place that you've done in a sector analysis. And on a national scale, it would actually work as well. So you've got that poly thing. Now, in terms of scaling up, it's a matter, I think, of getting it. Permaculture for many people, and it may be for you, is an add-on to your daily work. We have architects with permaculture. We have university lecturers in accounting in permaculture. We have museum curators following the 12 permaculture principles: minimize work, work where it counts, save energy, to set up museum standards. We had a police officer who took the 12 principles to a garden with new young policemen and taught them work on the edges, value the margin, all the things that in the principles. So permaculture's become attached to more people than we know. And it's really interesting how people are using it in their lives. Do we demand everyone becomes a permaculturist, throwing it back to you, or do we add permaculture into everyone's knowledge, including those who make laws and bylaws and big decisions? Right? Where do we want permaculture to be? At first, it was going to be very separate. Remember David saying, we're going to create a different world, the world will look at and adopt from there. The other thing is to graft it on and feed it. Tell them they're doing well, it's excellent. Where can you use this in your work? How can you promote it? Because in your classes, you might find you've got 30 people from all sorts of different. I had a wonderful course once, and it was one of the most effective with tradespeople. I think we had 15 tradespeople, plumbers, tilers, electricians, painters, except they brought the babies, and that was difficult. They're all doing childcare, and they ran round and had to be looked after, but that's another issue. These tradespeople go into homes and people say to them, what will I do here? And they say, you need R4.2 insulation in your roof first. Put a window in there, make a clear door there. And they're able to advise much, much more effectively. They all asked. I asked my own tradespeople, what should I do and what do you think? And then they say, what do you want? And then you say, what have you seen? So if a tradesperson knows, they are so effective. And for months later, and they're still in touch, they'd have meals together and talk about how they were using permaculture knowledge. I guess there's a number of roads. It's not one to scaling up.
Yeah.
What do you do? What do you think, Alfred?
Well, I want to ask you one follow-up question to that, but tell me about permaculture for tall buildings in megacities, because this is something that I don't hear anyone else in permaculture talking about besides you, and I think it's very, very interesting.
Now that comes from the Hong Kong Botanic Gardens and Kaduri Farms. Does anyone know them? You might, but anyway, years ago, they transformed all the botanic gardens, the big botanic gardens, there's only one in Hong Kong, to complete permaculture, to the point where you walk into the washroom and a little sign comes up and says, we have used 20 litres per person per day by midday, please use less water. And then all the way down, it's on a steep slope, all the way down there, catching water in all the buildings, terraced it, cleaning it, the plants. They had a model small garden. And in the middle of that small garden was a herb spiral. Now, people in Australia say, herb spiral, silly, it's just a symbol, you know, what's a herb spiral? That's just a joke, because they've got land. But if you've got very little water and very little land, to bring your garden bed up and plant all sides and turn it into a mountain of food, slightly different in each aspect, and only water it from the top, you've got the equivalent of about 9 meters, roughly 27 feet of linear planting. And it's all wound around like this. And it's planted to different foods. Beautiful. I stopped sort of agreeing with people when they said, oh, it's just a trick of permaculture to put in a herb. So it's not, it's a small climate speciality. So Hong Kong went on to take some of the really big buildings. Let's see if I can draw a big building. Great big building. This is a big, big building. Can you see it? Does it look like a big, big building? Sort of. These bottom floors here are usually lobby, aren't they? You've got lifts going up to floor 43 and floor 60 and huge concrete pillars and open spaces. They took all these open spaces, they turned them into markets, they turned them into swap shops, they turned them into a cafe, into a nursery. So they took what was virtually the undercroft of a big building, sort of equivalent of the first 2 or 3 floors that are generally high, and they packed it with what would be equivalent to a community. So you could have a community like this, and they all grow and plant out here, or you can have this community like this, and this is their growing and planting and working area down here. Now, then they work on different aspects. So the southern aspect's the cool aspect. Then they have got window boxes. They've got aquaculture with fish in it, in the equivalent of a bread box. about as big as your screen if you're working on a laptop. Lettuces on the top, fish in the bottom, and a little pump cleaning it. So there's always some vegetable in the office and the fish. Sometimes they make bigger ones. On their windowsills, they plant. They give their staff a little bit of land to grow their own food, and they're using big buildings to grow multiple small gardens. And you could turn this into a box. 1, 2 sides. When you see those, I put 3, 4. I do it of wire, and that's my composting in a small garden. Just throw everything into that box. Small one, small garden, put some straw on it, wet it, and in about 6 or 8 weeks, move it somewhere else. So there are many, many techniques. We learned a lot in refugee camps. People were growing food in the smallest areas imaginable. Absolutely fabulous stuff. You know, the things that we call friends, you know, permaculture guilds, people know very, very well. They know what grows with papaya and what grows with this, and pumpkins on roofs, on refugee camps, shade the roof, give food, vertical growing, lots and lots of plastic bags, right? Plastic bag full of soil with beans coming out and a whole wall packed with it. It doesn't work to make a vertical wall if you did one with, say, pieces of wood, because all the soil and water goes to the bottom. You can make a great wall by hanging string along and just tying all your pots to that and growing stuff. It goes quite green in a short time. There's so much food that can be grown in small spaces. I remember Bill Mollison said, all the food we need or want, this is quite shocking when you think of what we've done, can be grown in 6% of the Earth's surface. Not talking about the ocean. You look at railway lines and you look at mess and you look at, you know, 1 cow on 10 acres in Australia, 1 sheep on 5 acres. And they cut down all the trees so they could have grass that dies when it gets hot. You know, crazy illogical stuff. So it's really possible to do small scale. And we have to be able to do it. 70% of the world's people will be in cities in the next few years.
Yep. Which is a good way to transition into one question from Tobias, which is, can you speak about permaculture in a cross-cultural context, especially a post-colonial context?
Yeah, I've been in probably other cultures since about 1974. And the first one I really lived in was in Lesotho, where I lived in Tamai's village. You'd know Tamai, wouldn't you? Yeah. And I wasn't doing permaculture then, but the fact was I was starting to learn about the culture then. And what I learned was be guided by others. You could talk about don't pat a Buddhist child on the head and let the youngest person serve the rice, or don't put your bare feet in front of everyone if you're Buddhist. Don't step on the doorstep of a temple. You know, I mean, there's all that, which is the sideline. But if you just hold back a little bit and say, show me, tell me, show me, tell me, and wait. Because often the Westerner goes ahead, I'm in front, I'm the visitor, and they take that position. And instead, you pull yourself back and say, where do I sit? What do I say? Who's the person? What's happening? And people will guide you through. So in cross-cultural, there's so many things you can talk about here, Tobias, some of them around language and meaning. In Vietnam, for example, if you wanted to do something and you said to someone, oh, I want to build a bridge. If they said, oh, I want to see the minister. If your interpreter, that's right, Suzanne, if your interpreter said that would be difficult, you don't say, no, it's not. Just make an appointment for me. Just do it. That would be difficult means no. So it's often in translation and understanding of phrases. And I've recently been working with people in Bangladesh who are translating my latest book, and we've come up with words and phrases in their English and our English, Australian English particularly. It means something different. So you check it out a bit, how should I address people? What does that mean to you? What I think in French, there's no actual word for design. I'm not sure. I used to speak French quite fluently, but I think it is. Yeah. And that Amelia's given something there, just enough water. So the whole thing is cross-cultural context is giving people their own responsibility for knowledge. Who are the people in your market who own their own stalls? You can't say everyone should own their own stalls. And do you visit them if you're talking about the economy? Who are the people who are growing clean, good food in your area? What are the forest trees you need to grow again in the future to have enough timber for your grandchildren? The classic house with the flat roof of the desert, you don't draw a roof like that with a chimney, because in some countries they say, oh, that's for burning timber for charcoal. You have to draw the flat roof in Afghanistan with a curved chimney and steps up to it because people sleep there at night. It's sort of about getting it right for their context, even though it's the same information. Look, I'm about to go into that quite carefully, Tobias, with someone else here who wants to know, and the notes I've made over the years. So I'd be happy to share them with you if you write to me about it. So you can have my email later. Ah, Concepcion. Oui, c'est vrai. I think it's probably right, but it didn't quite work either sometimes. So, it's just some words don't exist in other languages. And you can take it for granted it does until you find everyone's confused. So, yeah. No, but that was a very good question. About the Gulf countries, what we would generally do rather than mist, and that was interesting, is put a long pipe beside the plant and into the ground, so we're watering deeply to keep the water lower down in the ground and not evaporating off the surface. I haven't seen that, but it's good. Yeah.
So I'd like to talk about future trends in permaculture, but as a lead-in, so Tobias came to visit me here in Catalonia a year ago, and he asked me a question that I think at the moment when I responded, I didn't answer very convincingly or answer very well. But he asked about permaculture for refugees. What use, what value can permaculture have for refugees? And I think that's a good way to start looking ahead to future trends in permaculture.
I guess when you're looking at, it was Karl Popper was the philosopher who said start at the bottom and get rid of the worst problems, things like malaria, or get everyone housed, and then other problems go away or they're less. Okay, so permaculture for refugees. I've been working in countries of war and civil war, Vietnam, East Timor, Cambodia, I don't know, poor Srinagar up there in northwest India invaded, in Kurdistan, and then finally decided if it worked in these environments, it would work in refugee camps. Because people were saying permaculture is only good if you've got a garden or an acre of land. It's no good if you haven't got land. Now, what we have found is that often we can get land in different ways, or there's very small amount of land. One of the issues about being a refugee is what some of us went through in COVID, uncertainty. Were any of you locked up? Had to stay inside, couldn't go out, couldn't go to work? Any of you confined? Can you put up your hand? Had to stay? Did you find any sort of confinement difficult in COVID? Because a lot of people found the uncertainty It depended on your country. In Melbourne, everyone was locked up for 6 months, and they found that very difficult. They couldn't visit a sick mother, and they couldn't go out of their local government, and they couldn't go to hospitals, and there was a whole lot that was very challenging. So COVID gave people who were relatively well off the chance to know what it was like to live with uncertainty, whether COVID would get worse, whether it would kill anyone in your family, whether they would be hospitalized, what the test would show. And so if you're in a refugee camp, one of the greatest things you suffer is uncertainty. Will you get registered with the UNHCR? Can you even get to see them? You know, no one in Pakistan can get to the UNHCR. That's impossible. You can't even get to the Indian embassy in Pakistan. You can't get in the door. You can't get an appointment. So how do you get registered? If you're in Kurdistan, you have to go into Erbil and get registered, and you're in a fenced-in area with soldiers with AK-47s. So how do you get registered? So you have to wait till someone comes to the camp and takes your name, and that's often a solicitor working and tries to register you, and you're waiting. You're getting bad messages from home. Today the Taliban, yesterday the soldiers came. Tomorrow we won't have food. Gaza is probably the biggest thing that haunts me at the moment, and I feel we should be there if we could. So if you offer something like English, they say people drop away. They don't continue coming to the courses, even though refugees will probably need English. But remember, people who are traumatized find it very hard to concentrate. So if you're saying now the verb to catch is C-A-T-C-H, cat, I caught, you catch, you will catch, you know, it's horrible. Your mind isn't there. You're thinking of people at home or what's going to happen to your children. And then there's the uncertainty of another country, and there's uncertainty of safety and what tomorrow will bring. And camp management is often horrific. There are rackets in camps, and there's bullying and management by mafia groups. So when we took permaculture, we didn't know if it would work or not. We knew people weren't sticking with computer lessons and weren't sticking with English. However, we took permaculture, and by the fourth day, there were people, we had 50 people, and the next day they were queued up outside to come to the course. But we didn't have room for them and we couldn't manage it. Now, what was it about permaculture? They've got seeds, they can grow food, they can store water, they can start building soil, they can start thinking about useful skills. Many of them were Syrians who simply said, when we go home, we can do permaculture much better, but we're going to practice here. They could build areas for women and children. They could put plants in pots. They had tiny concrete courtyards sometimes if they weren't living in tents. They knew how to warm or cool the tent. That part of Iraq goes from -15 to +50 in its desert. So, you know, having a little bit of control over your environment with simple resources, nothing bought in, no straw, no cardboard, just managing what you've got. It was a critically empowering and interesting. And it changed the conversation from, did you hear from home your sister or brother or your child in another camp? And have you heard you're getting your UN status or not? Or when can we go home? 2, if we grow more of that seed, we can give it to more people. If we save the water better, because the water only came from 9 in the morning to 11 in the morning, but then we taught them to use the grey water for washing up and washing dishes and washing themselves. So there was suddenly multiplication of resources through using them many times and being able to do it. It was doable now and doable in the future. You can carry it in your head and your hands. And it's something to do today. One man said, I've been running a farm with 5 people working. What do I do? Another man said, I was a French teacher. What will I do? You know, so then they were all doing in different ways and they had a common topic. It was really fascinating. And that was true for every camp in Turkey, in Greece, right, in Malaysia, Philippines, dispossessed people, Bangladesh. So we would like the UN and World Vision and Red Cross, Red Crescent to train all their NGOs. And I hope some of you will do that, because if they are permanently working in refugee situations every day and they've got permaculture, they're in such a brilliant position to empower the other people in the camp and transform that camp. People always want to go home. It's never going to become so beautiful they want to live there. They might have to, but they never want to. That's just, it hits the scores, presses many buttons for people that are favourable.
Okay. And what about, we have a question from Zelina in Malaysia. What advice for newbies like me in starting up with permaculture?
Well, let's ask the people listening, because they're all permaculturists. Marcellus in Greece, we did some good work there after the fires. Well, they started a great project. Sorry. Yeah. There was just someone I was going to answer. Oslo, I'm sorry, Yvonne, you can flick through. Oh, Dilek. Let me tell you a story of Dilek. So they've done permaculture. This is where it goes. It's not only refugees. It's the fact that when they had the big earthquakes, which are still going on, at 3 or 4 one morning, I got a phone call from Dilek and permaculturists there, and they said, what should we be doing? I was able to say, keep women safe, look after the water, have some guards on the camp, start thinking of food now, even though it's early days, because food supplies will be cut. The next thing they were doing it, then we had a big problem somewhere, and I said to Dilek, what should we do? What have you learnt through the earthquake and sending permaculture and issues through? And they wrote back a long letter of their experience. So you see, transferred from refugees with earthquakes and refugees to Dilek, and then from Dilek out. It was the earthquake in Herat. No, somewhere like that. Sorry, I've forgotten. But thank you, Dilek. I'll remember afterwards. Sorry, Alfred. Yeah, we can. I just wanted to mention that because it shows where your teaching goes, doesn't it? And where it ends up, and who might want to contact you in the future. Yeah. Right. Sorry, Alfred. That was rude of
you. No, good. And what other future trends are you seeing, Rosemary, in permaculture?
A change in teaching, using a lot more role plays and a lot more models. People would think you'd use a lot more film. Yes, just little skimps of films that might show how to do something. But in many cases, what we're doing is teaching differently. It's getting people engaged in the teaching as we go. So all the different methods, using everything in sight. If I'm teaching about a house, and say, look, this keeps hot. Here's the house. Now, what climate's that? Dry climate, right. What do we have underground beside the house? Right? What do we have underground? Oh, we'll have our water tank underground because of evaporation. Good. Can someone design that for their place and show us? See, the teaching is cluing in and getting people to do it immediately. And I think if I'm teaching about forests, we all go out and we find the nearest group of trees that looks like a forest, and we sit and look at the edge, and then we look at where the wind is, and then we look at and say, gosh, each tree's transpiring 8,000 litres of water a day. How many trees can you see? Count them. How many litres is that? Getting the reality of permaculture into your students through use the environment. Let's go and walk down the hill and find the spot where the water is the key point. Let's look at the peak. Where's the saddle over there? Make a model. Use as much as you can of the environment. When you're talking about north, south, east, and west, if north is there, what would you call that wall? So north is over there. What would you call that wall? call it a north-facing wall. And when they've got it, you then, that one faces east. What's that? East-facing wall. Until people have got it. And then the next thing, you walk outside for morning tea and they're all going north, east, north-facing fence. Oh, we don't want a big building on the south. That'll cut the sun. So bring it home to them through their body and through showing, but still keep the challenges there. Transpiration, evapotranspiration, right? We're looking at CO2, the seas getting warmer, and why and how, nearly at peak. Underground water, for example, we're starting to ask students to show how you're going to get more water back into the artesian basin and water tables. We're going to work more closely with coastal areas. If it's very dangerous, you have to just say you'd better move. But we're also looking at communities in Malaysia and communities in Bangladesh and the Marsh Arabs who have lived with the tides coming in and out below their houses, you know, right up to the kitchen in the Solomon Islands. Here's the house on stilts, right? The tide comes into here and out to there. People can live like that and live well. We're looking at the desert areas of the Middle East, where all the water, all of it, is underground, intakes, evaporation, cleanliness. We're looking at houses where instead of putting a gutter around the roof here, as comes out of countries with big rainfalls and snow, the roof slopes inland to a courtyard, as in parts of Spain and Italy and North Africa. And then you run the water into a tank right down the middle of the building. No evaporation, no water loss, clean, healthy water. You know, we're saying, what did they do in the past in these areas? How can we bring it back again? And what's good? You know, if we're working in Lesotho, we'd be talking about rondables made of local materials, not corrugated iron houses as the world gets warmer. We'd be looking at the condensation of the thatch roofs, and we'd be looking at planting our zone 1 around the edge where you can catch some drip line. So, you know, you're looking at what is, but you're teaching the same permaculture. I think we don't teach to a place because remember the climate's going to change. In 20 years, it might be so dry that if you're teaching for a cool temperate, you might need to be teaching for a drier place or a wetter place. So you have to know what the IPCC is doing. I ask people to look at that before they submit their designs, show how they will prevent things going downhill to the sea, how they can get water into the groundwater and the plants without doing any work. I just have a little shade out here that has no gutter on it. And I've built a little drain underneath full of stones and probably a couple of 1,000 litres over spring and summer when there's high condensation, just runs into the soil there and down into our waterfalls and hanging swamps of the mountains. You know, it's not difficult. It's observation and understanding where you are. Yeah, so I've gone off track. I've gone off track with each question, and you haven't called.
But I'm enjoying each time you go off track. It's like a river delta, and now, but we're coming back to ask one final question from Tiago, a wonderful colleague from Lisbon, Portugal. Tiago, you have 2 questions. Which one would you like to ask? And then we're going to wrap up the talk and just mention some upcoming teacher trainings. So Tiago, which would you like to ask of your 2 questions?
I think the 2 questions are one, but the one that I'm having more trouble, sorry, is to have a better vision of how to break through financially as a permaculture teacher. Because the process, I noticed that I've been doing some networking with other teachers, and some are really good, good person that are willing to cooperate. But I've seen others that don't answer or don't care about making a connection with new people. So I see that there is lots of competition, maybe more than cooperation between the professionals. So because uh, now I'm dedicated to do this full time, so the challenge of the financial challenges is it's upon my shoulders. So I'm trying to find a way to do it right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't actually know your financial situation, but Alfred's worked over this a bit. He's probably better than I am. I worked out what was enough for me. Now, if you've got young children going to teenage years and they're going to need help to move into homes and tertiary education, then it's quite different, because I left that behind, well, really some years ago now. What I've done is work out enough and then work out the income to get that. And I've often had a couple of sources. And it's very good to have a couple, because anything can dry up, or you can become redundant, or, we never know. We're living in the age of incertitude, I think, as they call it in French, the age of uncertainty. So we can't think that the climate is sure, neither perhaps our work and our payments are sure. There's several things you can do. You can go to local government and offer to put on courses in neighbourhoods, and they will pay you, usually, they pay you a fee to do it informally. You can often work with another permaculture teacher. You can set up your own courses. We are working on trying to cooperate. The first generation of permaculturists who were teaching, they were pretty competitive, the Australians, on water use. It was really a bit rough. Today, all the young ones who are teaching are good friends and work together on syllabus and experience and meeting up. So if you can have a little teachers guild that swaps experience and knowledge, and that's one thing. Another thing is TAFE, the education for technical students. So our technical colleges were really happy for me to offer permaculture design certificate for quite a long time under agriculture. But I taught them the whole PDC, but they did the, prepare the needs of the environment beforehand, and then put in your enterprise approach, which was very good, because they did the water and the windbreaks and the wildlife zones and everything else as well. In addition, you could do consulting. So I'm not really fond of consulting, because when you consult, you visit someone's place and they say, I was thinking of putting the roses there, and it's cold and wet and they'll die. And you say, oh, there probably is a better place. And they say, well, we want them there. So it's better to say, come and do a course. Come and do a course with us, and everyone learns together, and it's much, much more effective. But there is a living to be made out of consultancy. There's a living. Brenna makes a living out of drawing. She draws for America, for American books. She's known through the whole gardening world as an artist. You just look up Brenna, Brenna. She's also a brilliant teacher, gifted. She's totally convinced about the teacher's course. She and Sally sort of say this is transformative the way the PDC isn't. So that's something interesting. You could apply to an NGO. I don't know where you work or what NGOs, but it could be that we did one once, I think, for St. Vincent de Paul, because they run a wing here with shops and things, and they were offering many of the people who come to them a course. So it's bits and pieces, it's not permanent work. The main thing is you start to make your reputation as a good teacher, then people pay you. Then you get the payment. Once they know you, they'll often say, we pay this for that. Someone just contacted me recently and said, we pay $1,000 a day. Well, that's brilliant, except I'm not on the I'm on the gift economy now, so that's not where I'm at. But, you know, it's your reputation as reputable, good teacher. That's what really counts. And you won't know you will unless you're already a teacher until you start teaching. And many people find it's just home for them. It's much more facilitation than teaching. We call it teaching because people have come for knowledge. They want to learn from you. That's why they're there. And you are giving them ideas, whether it's about rehydrating land or new types of economy. That's your job, but deliver it in ways that it's all empowering for them. Yeah. Oh, there's a really Congo. Akira, that is heartbreaking. About you've got a million and a half people due to war. One of the best things we can do is work against war. You know, they never count the carbon cost. They never count the destructive cost. There's a huge, they are feeding off the military industry like nothing you've seen. The military industry is Schweppes cool drinks. The military industry is Cadbury's chocolate. The military industry is Johnson & Johnson. We should actually start boycotting and telling people, stay away from this group, they're killing people. I have no hesitation because I've seen so many people displaced. They're making lightweight machine guns now to give to small children who can carry them because they're not heavy. We really need a big movement to work against wars in whatever way we can. We really must. And if we could get rid of the armaments industry, people would have to throw stones at each other. David and Goliath. I could think of a couple of world leaders I'd get to throw stones at each other, you know.
Yeah.
So as for would you like to talk another time, Akil? Because it's slightly different for your situation. You've got the war, you've got displaced people, you also have huge floods. Goma is now flooded, which is absolutely dreadful. Then you get typhoid, people's goods ruined, they lose their ID papers, their pot might float away, they need the food or cooking. This is another situation that's beyond, again, a stabilized camp. This is disaster and current. And it's good for us to know about these things and where permaculture can be. Probably the best thing is to be in touch with some of the people in Uganda who are actively, we've been sending them handheld rechargeable projectors and then appropriate short films, because sometimes there's a million people in a camp, we have all different local languages, as you can imagine. A million people in a camp from different tribal groups will have different languages. The people we work with speak English. They then never translate it into written. They do simultaneous translation from short videos on the walls of huts or a sheet or a place at night where people can come and watch. The big thing now we're hearing from refugees is they need seed, running out of seed, and that, of course, is extremely serious. But I'll put my, you can put my email up, Alfred, if you like, and I'll have a little talk to people if I can, especially Akil or Motuele, Molatsani, a few people that, you know, this is different. Dilek, you were marvelous in providing back to us. Project.
Okay, well, we have come to the end of our time. I wanted to thank Rosemary for your presence here. It's always a pleasure to talk with you and hear from you, and for your inspiration. And I also wanted to mention that I've shared in the chat some information about an upcoming online teacher training that's based on the Permaculture teacher training platform that Rosemary and some of her colleagues have developed over the years. And there'll also be 2 upcoming teacher trainings, at least in person, here in Spain in July and November, one with a focus on children in permaculture and the second on a focus on refugees. Rosemary, do you have any teacher trainings coming up in Australia or elsewhere?
Yeah. We've just done 2 in Australia in the last 4 months. One for underprivileged youth in a city near us, and that was brilliant. We've already got 3 of them joined together to form a small team to start. If you get too many people, it goes all wrong. But we've got a couple of experienced people in permaculture and someone not so experienced of migrant descent, and they're going to run at PDC locally, and we need them desperately. That will be a paid for. You can either work out on payment per day. It might be $50 a day for 12 days. It might be something less or more, depending on your market. 2 free places. So that's one. And the other one we did was with a rural group at University of Western Sydney at their Earth Care Centre, and now they're putting it on for the students in the centre. So that's another one. The next one I'm doing is in Bangladesh for NGOs. We got some funding to be able to teach NGOs, and preferably local NGOs who are working with the 1 million Rohingya there, to teach a teaching course themselves. It's been quite difficult, so they want to show people how to make compost in plastic baskets and how to clean up the rubbish and how to, and in a way they're right, but in another way they need a bigger view on how to restore a whole landscape, because that's critically what we're doing, restoring landscapes and cultures. So that one's in about 3 weeks' time. I'm just dealing with visa complications. And then Malaysia, where they've got 5 million refugees, and Narani's been doing brilliant work. Taiwan want a teacher training before the IPC, International Permaculture Conference in Taiwan this year. First time it's ever been held in Asia. It's been in Malaysia, it's been in Malawi, been in South Africa, South America, it's been in England. This year in November, it's in Taiwan. They've got some wonderful permaculture. So, okay, I'm teaching a couple of courses, but really I want co-teachers, and I always take a co-teacher with me to learn. We discussed the night before, especially if it's interpreted, and preferably a local person. That is just part of my thing. Someone must learn with me all the time. I'm not. And as for making, teachers should really work together. We need to find out what worked for you and how did that work and what did you do? How did you teach patterns in nature? How did you teach design methods? You know, we just need everyone to talk to each other to find out what's the best way, because there's probably 10 methods for each topic, teaching method. You're not going to do chalk and talk. And some are more appropriate than others. And some of you have had that experience and know what it is. Now, you're not teaching a field visit the way you teach cuttings. They're both practicals, but they're entirely different. Anyway, that's enough raving for me.
All right. Well, I wanted to give a chance to, there's a couple of people who did the online teacher training with us last time. Would either of you like to say something about what the course was like for you? Tiago?
Yeah, it was a wonderful experience, both in the more human aspects, getting to know that there are people looking for the same path as you, the path of justice and hope for our future, and the more technical and how do you say, the juice, you know, the knowing the knowledge that that Alfred and Rosemary and Jen bring up to the table is very valuable. I'm teaching a course in Lisbon, and every session I bring up the knowledge that was transmitted to me during the permaculture teacher training. So it really sparked my flame as a teacher, and it's very it gave me a sense of releasing myself from fears. So yeah, it's very, very beautiful thing to do. Yeah.
Okay, great. And Montelli?
Well, the teacher training was really good for me. I discovered that teaching is not that much about talking a lot. It's about talking less and using different tools like video and maybe pictures and all that. Well, there are not so many opportunities for me here to teach, but I really gained a lot of information and experience, and I made a lot of good friends who really helped me until now. They are supporting me. It's been good. I'm sure I'll do good in future with the support that I'm getting from my friends who I got from the course, who are global. And there are so many opportunities that came my way. I'm applying. I do all sorts of things, even locally here. My CV is really good, and I think I'll get a lot of opportunities because of the training that I got. And think that's it.
Great. Thank you so much. It was really great to have both of you on that training. Are there any last urgent questions or comments before we wrap up and go out into the world, into the real world? Okay. Thank you all for taking this time to be together. I wish you all the best, and I want to share one thing that keeps me inspired in this moment of the rise of the extreme right here in Europe, and in particular here in the Mediterranean. It was a comment from someone who is struggling against fascism during the Spanish Civil War, who said, and I think it resonates with permaculture, which is why I'm sharing it, that we are not in the least afraid of ruins. The destroyers may blast and lay bare this world before they exit the stage of history, but we carry a new world in our hearts, and this world is growing as we speak. So thank you all. Have a really good weekend, and let's stay in touch.
Thank you.
Salam alaikum.
Obrigado. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you.
One. Stay well, stay safe, go teaching. It's great.
Yeah.
And thank you, Jen, for bringing us on. And yeah,
Thanks so much. Thanks, Rosemary.
You're observing the teaching and what was happening. So this is a bit special. Yeah. Okay. Special people here today. Lovely. Akil, I hope I hear from you. You can get my email address from Alfred at any time. It's fine. Or anyone can have it. It's really good. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Rosemary.
Bye.
Be well.
See you. Bye.